The case of Jasse Correa. Jasse Correa was born in Praia, Cabo Verde, but her family moved to the United States when she was just 3 years old. She grew up in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and Boston became her hometown. As she grew older, Jasse became a loving mother to her daughter, Gabriella. However, Jasse's personal life was marred by difficulties. Jasse's husband, Miguel Castro, physically attacked her. Despite wanting to leave him, Miguel refused to let her go and severely beat her. Jasse eventually reported the incident to the police, and Miguel was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Jasse worked as a waitress at Del Frisco, a Boston restaurant. In her free time, she enjoyed dancing and photography. She cherished moments spent with her family, friends, and daughter, Gabriella. One of her favorite activities was taking her little daughter to the park. On the evening of February 23, 2019, Jasse celebrated her birthday with friends at Venue, a nightclub in Boston's Deter district. Before heading out, she left her 2-year-old daughter with her family and got ready for a night out wearing a new orange jumpsuit. They had spent the evening dancing and drinking champagne at a nightclub. When the club closed, Jasse and her 2 friends stepped outside, but they eventually went their separate ways, leaving Jasse alone. She never made it home that night, and her phone was turned off with all calls going straight to voicemail. For 2 days, Sunday and Monday, there was no news from Jasse. No one had seen her since she left the nightclub on Sunday morning. On Tuesday, February 26th, Jasse's father, when Correa and one of Jasse's friends went to the police station to report her disappearance. The police immediately launched an investigation. The detectives' first priority was to determine where Jasse went after leaving the nightclub. Jasse's family and friends distributed flyers around the city, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The detectives also interviewed Jasse's friends who were with her that night, but they didn't know where she had gone after leaving the club. According to her friends, Jasse had planned to head home after saying goodbye. To gather more information, the police interviewed witnesses and reviewed CCTV footage from cameras inside and outside the nightclub. One recording showed Jasse on the sidewalk on Tremont Street, near the nightclub, talking to several people at 2:14 a.m. This was after she had left the club. The footage revealed that Jasse, who appeared to be intoxicated, mistakenly got into an Uber she hadn't ordered. The driver, unhappy about the mix-up, argued with her and eventually pushed her out of the vehicle. After being forced out of the car, Jasse continued to argue with the driver. That's when an unknown man approached her and took her hand, pulling her aside to talk. Despite possibly wanting to leave, Jasse was unable to free herself from his grasp. The CCTV footage showed the man still holding Jasse's hands, pulling her closer. Eventually, Jasse left the area with him. In hindsight, it's clear that she had fallen prey to a predator who took advantage of her vulnerable state. The next camera footage showed Jasse jumping onto his back, and he carried her to his car. They drove away together. 14 minutes later, the police had many questions to answer. Who was this man and where had he taken Jasse? Fortunately, they quickly identified the man and located his address. Louis Coleman, a 32-year-old man from a good family background, was with Jasse at the time of the incident. He had earned a master's degree in physics and had no prior record with the law. Notably, there was no information in the police database about Louis owning a car. However, his mother, a resident of California, was the owner of a 2016 red Buick, which matched the type of vehicle involved in the incident with Jasse. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, about 50 miles from the Venue nightclub where he was last seen with Jasse. When police arrived at his home, they found that Louis was no longer there. However, CCTV footage from inside and outside the building revealed disturbing evidence. It's worth noting that the drive from the Venue club to Louis's apartment typically takes about an hour. Since Louis returned to his apartment at 4:15 a.m. on Sunday, approximately 2 hours after he was seen leaving with Jasse, it's likely that he stopped somewhere along the way. The next day, Louis sent an email to his colleague stating that he would be taking a few more days off. Based on the content of the email, it appears that Louis was trying to buy time to cover his tracks. Over the next 2 days, Lewis attempted to conceal evidence of the crime. Further CCTV footage analysis sheds light on what happened to Jasse after she left with Lewis. Although the police never released the initial footage due to ethical concerns, it showed Lewis entering his apartment building with Jasse. FBI Special Agent Thomas Sukas described the footage as follows. Lewis was seen walking from a red sedan towards the front of the building carrying a body with long hair and orange pants. Agent Zukas believes that this footage shows Lewis carrying Jasse's body into his apartment building. According to Zukas, security footage from the building's lobby reveals that at approximately 4:27 a.m., Lewis entered the building carrying an unconscious or already deceased Jasse in his arms. He proceeded to the elevator, took it to the 6th floor. Notably, on February 26th, the same day Jasse's father reported her disappearance to the police, Lewis made a suspicious purchase at Walmart. His receipt shows he bought multiple items that raise red flags, including protective suits, duct tape, electrical tape, candles, gloves, safety goggles, a mask, and Clorox bleach. The next day, while friends and family distributed flyers with Jasse's picture, Lewis made another concerning purchase at Walmart, caught on camera at 9:22 p.m. This time, he bought a large suitcase and a canister. On February 27, 2019, at around 9:58 p.m., Lewis returned to the apartment building, and video footage appears to show him carrying the newly purchased large suitcase. Further footage captures Lewis taking the suitcase from his apartment to his vehicle in the parking lot, as evidenced by a recording at 2:15 a.m. on February 28. A video shows a man, later identified as Lewis, struggling to lift a suitcase into the trunk of his car. This footage is part of a larger investigation into the disappearance of Jasse Correia, who was last seen on February 24th and was believed to be at Lewis' apartment. Between 2:44 a.m. and 4:02 a.m., Lewis was seen leaving the building multiple times carrying various items, including cardboard boxes, trash bags, a bottle of bleach, a computer tower, a laptop case, and a small duffel bag. On February 28, 2019, police obtained a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. During their search, they found several suspicious items, including 2 packages of hooded coveralls and 2 respirator masks. They also examined a sofa in the apartment, which was missing one of its 4 large cushions. Outside the apartment complex, in a dumpster, police found a collection of items that raised further suspicions. These included white trash bags, a bag containing plastic sheets, men's jeans with bleach stains, and the belt. Additional items found in the dumpster included a white nylon hooded coverall, an unfilled box of baking soda, clear safety goggles, duct tape packaging, rubbing alcohol, Walmart bags, used plastic gloves, an empty package from a car air freshener, 3 used packages of purifying charcoal, and a sponge. On the afternoon of February 28, 2019, police stopped a car driven by Lewis near Wilmington, Delaware. Officers ordered Lewis to exit the vehicle and asked if he was alone. Lewis reportedly responded by saying, "She's in the trunk." When police investigated, they found the body of Jasse wrapped in a sofa cushion cover inside a black trash bag, which was placed in a large suitcase that matched the one Lewis had taken into his apartment the previous day. Experts who inspected the car found 2 cracks on the passenger side windshield, leading police to suspect that the man had attacked Jasse inside the vehicle. As a result, Lewis was arrested and taken to a Delaware State Police barracks. During questioning, Lewis had a large bandage on the right side of his face, which he claimed was from sheep when asked about it. A forensic examination revealed that Jasse died from a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. Additionally, seminal fluid was found on her body, and DNA analysis matched Lewis's DNA. Prosecutors noted that Lewis's DNA was also found under Jasse's fingertips. Although the exact location of Jasse's death could not be determined, it is believed to have occurred either in the car or at Lewis's apartment. On Saturday, March 9, 2019, family and community members gathered at St. Peter's Parish in Dorchester to pay their respects to Jasse Correia. Many wore white or displayed buttons, shirts, and sweatshirts with Jasse's face and the phrase, "Justice for Jasse." Maka DeAndrade, Jasse's cousin and best friend, delivered the first eulogy, expressing the community's sadness and acceptance of Jasse's passing. Deanna said, "We may not understand why Jasse's life was cut short, but I have faith that her death was not in vain. I trust that God has a plan, and I have faith in that." Boston Mayor Marty Walsh addressed the crowd, vowing to work towards creating a safer world for women. He emphasized that young women should be able to go out and celebrate without fear and return home safely to their loved ones. He acknowledged the immense pain Jasse Correia's family has endured and expressed his condolences. When Correia expressed gratitude to the city and law enforcement agencies for their tireless efforts in investigating Jasse's disappearance and death, he also paid a heartfelt tribute to his daughter, saying, "Rest in paradise, my dear Jasse. Rest in peace, my dear child." Lewis Coleman, the suspect, has been charged with kidnapping resulting in death, a crime that could carry the death penalty or a life sentence. However, prosecutors have announced that they will not seek capital punishment. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence, including a video of Coleman dragging Jasse's body into his apartment and his online search history following her disappearance. FBI agents reported on Lewis's online activity in the days following the alleged kidnapping. He searched for topics such as whether a person can fit inside a suitcase and how to remove a tooth that is not loose. However, Lewis's defense team has disputed the relevance of this evidence to the kidnapping charge. They argue that the prosecution's focus has been on Lewis's actions after the alleged victim's death, rather than on the kidnapping itself. Attorney David stated, "This case is not about how Lewis behaved after her death, or whether he did anything illegal or inappropriate. The government's evidence has mainly centered on these issues, but I believe they are not crucial to determining whether a kidnapping occurred." Court documents filed by the prosecution and defense provide a detailed account of the events surrounding Jasse Correia's disappearance and death. Although they sides present different versions of what happened, the documents reveal disturbing details about the circumstances leading up to Jasse's death. Prosecutors established that the defendant, Lewis, was at the same nightclub as Jasse and her friends on the night of her disappearance. However, Lewis was interacting with a different woman he had just met, not Jasse. They exchanged phone numbers and texted each other while at the club and after it closed. The prosecution and defense have presented conflicting narratives about the events that unfolded. Prosecutors argue that Jasse was not the aggressor and that Lewis deceived her into getting into his car by offering her a ride to her friend's apartment, ultimately taking her life. In contrast, the defense claims that Jasse became aggressive after being pushed out of an Uber by the driver and that she initiated a fight with Lewis. The defense argues that the crime was a spontaneous altercation rather than a premeditated act of stalking, kidnapping, and murder. Prosecutors pointed out that the defendant's main argument was that the victim, who weighed 119 pounds, had attacked the defendant, who weighed 200 pounds. However, this claim was not convincing, especially considering that the victim's autopsy revealed the presence of multiple prohibited substances in her body, in addition to alcohol. The defense team attempted to minimize their client's involvement in the crime. Despite this, in June 2022, was found guilty of one count of kidnapping resulting in death. The defense team then filed a motion arguing that the evidence was insufficient to support the conviction, but this motion did not change the outcome of the trial. In October 2022, Lewis Coleman, 36, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for kidnapping and killing Jasse Correia. The court also ordered him to pay $60,000 in compensation to the victim's family. Today's story takes us to Wright City, Missouri, a charming Midwestern destination with a population of only 4,300 people. Its location along the busy Interstate 70 has made it a hub for transportation and logistics businesses, attracting entrepreneurs and visitors from across the state. However, Wright City is much more than just a transportation hub. This historic downtown area features unique shops and delightful eateries, making it an inviting spot to unwind after a busy day of exploring. The city's highly regarded school district is committed to education, offering top-notch schools for children. Wright City's mix of small-town charm and modern convenience makes it a destination with something for everyone. But like all good things, it too had its dark secrets hidden away from the world. June 26, 2004 was a serene day in Wright City, Missouri. However, the city was stunned when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in a rest area along the bustling Interstate 70. While trimming the brush, the maintenance worker noticed something suspicious. Out of curiosity, he went to investigate it further and ended up uncovering a decapitated torso. The sight sent shockwaves down his spine. He immediately called the police and informed them about what he had found. It was a discovery that shocked the town of Wright City. The human remains had no head or limbs and was simply a torso. Since the remains were found in a secluded area, investigators theorized that the body was dumped in this area, but the victim was most likely killed elsewhere. But what they found provided more questions than answers. The torso was dressed in a simple black bra, and there were scars from a previous appendectomy and C-section visible on her body, but not much else. All the investigators found at the crime scene were some DNA samples on the victim's body and a knife. After an initial examination of the crime scene, her torso was taken for an autopsy, but because the body was without hands, legs, and a head, it eliminated almost all possible ways in which she could be identified, making it impossible to know who the victim was and how she ended up in that place. As there was not much evidence found at the crime scene, police were relying on the autopsy report for more information. But unfortunately, even the autopsy report could not pinpoint an exact cause of death. It was suggested that the neck had been ruthlessly severed, but it was impossible to clearly say how she met her demise. Initially, it was believed that she was a victim of organ trafficking, but they found that no organs had been removed from the body, which indicated that the murder was not to steal her organs. The case left investigators scratching their heads as they tried to piece together the puzzle of her final moments. The discovery set off a major investigation, with many detectives working tirelessly to find any leads that would help solve it. This was the start of a lengthy investigation, which would puzzle police for many years to follow. As a first step, investigators interviewed people who lived in the nearby area and urged them to jog their memory in search of something unusual they might have witnessed in the area around the time of the discovery of the remains. Some witnesses said that they saw a white utility van in the area the day before the torso was discovered. But while that information looked promising, it did not generate any new leads. Even after a thorough investigation, the police could not come up with any suspects. Without much evidence or suspects, the case eventually went cold. The investigation was reignited in 2014, when Lieutenant Matt Schmutz of the Warren County, Missouri Sheriff's Department took over the case and started to investigate missing persons in the area that matched the characteristics of the victim. The following year, he began to talk with investigators in Madison County, Illinois, on a missing persons case that shared similar traits. Then in April 2006, a person who could have been from the woman's family whose name was Brian Barker went to the Warren County Sheriff's Department when he realized that the torso could be his sister's. He provided DNA for an identity test, but the testing was inconclusive. Brian refused to give up on finding his sister's killer, even when all hope seemed lost. Even though his initial attempt to provide DNA evidence failed, he didn't give up. After years of failed attempts to identify the remains found in rural Missouri, a new lead was finally uncovered. This lead was Ashley Kinnear, who was likely the oldest daughter of the woman and who was contacted due to information Brian gave to the police. An expert suggested getting DNA samples from the woman's relatives, including her oldest daughter Ashley Kinnear and 2 other siblings. Thankfully, they agreed to provide the DNA for testing, which ultimately led to a breakthrough in the case. And in the Missouri lab found a match. Finally, the identity of the torso was revealed. It was stated that the victim was Deanna Howland, also known by her aliases Deanna Froelich or Deanna Kinnear. Records show that Deanna was married more than once and had multiple aliases, including Deanna Barker, Deanna Kinnear, and Deanna Froelich. She had at least 2 children and was born in Belleville, Illinois in the United States. Despite her struggles and the difficulties she faced in life, Deanna Howland was a person with hopes and dreams, loved by her family and missed by those who knew her. Her tragic death at the hands of a murderer is a reminder that every person, no matter their struggles, is deserving of justice and respect. Deanna was a woman who lived a troubled life, battling addiction and often living as a transient. She was known to frequent areas of Illinois such as Granite City and East St. Louis and was recognized by many as a prostitute who had problems with the consumption of illegal drugs. Despite her struggles, Deanna was a caring mother to her children. Her daughter Ashley Kinnear remembers her as a loving and devoted parent. Ashley became concerned about her mother's well-being when her mother failed to show up for a school play that she had promised to attend in May 2004, and there was no further contact after that. Deanna's disappearance was out of character, and her daughter knew something was wrong when her mother didn't even call her on her birthday, something she never missed. For all this time, Ashley had been confused and disheartened regarding her mother's disappearance. She had tried to contact every possible person she could think of or knew about, but still she had gotten no information about her mother. The only thing she could do was wait for her mother to show up one day. From this, it is clear that despite her troubles, Deanna was clearly a caring and loving mother who always made an effort to stay in touch with her children. After years of investigation and diligent work, authorities finally made a breakthrough in the case of Deanna Howland in 2022. The suspect was found with the help of a DNA report. The DNA that investigators got from Deanna's body and from the knife which was found at the crime scene was what finally helped them crack the case. The defendant, whose identity has been released, was linked through his DNA evidence that investigators found on Deanna's body. It took years of testing and analysis through forensic genetics to make the connection, but the evidence was finally conclusive in 2022, which led them to a 63-year-old man. The man was identified as Mike Anthony Clardy, a longtime resident of Maryland Heights, Missouri. The quiet life that Mike Clardy and his wife were leading came to an abrupt end when police arrested Clardy on January 10, 2023 at their Maryland Heights home. This wasn't the first time Clardy's life was disrupted, as he had an accident in 2004 that rendered him legally blind. But this time, it was due to his alleged involvement in this heinous crime. The suspect was able to hide from the police for 2 decades, but was finally identified. Despite these accusations, court records show that Clardy was not linked with any other killings and did not have a criminal record. But now, Clardy is facing second-degree murder charges in relation to the killing of Deanna Howland. The next step was to uncover the whole truth behind the heinous crime. Clardy, who had been compliant with the arrest, was brought in for interrogation. As the detectives probed deeper into the matter, they questioned him about the details of the murder, and more crucially, about the remains that were found. In 2023, after almost 2 decades, justice was finally served for Deanna Howland as her killer Mike Clardy was charged for her murder. The St. Louis Prosecuting Attorney's Office filed an indictment stating that Clardy confessed to killing Howland in June 2004, as well as scattering her remains across multiple locations. Despite his initial denial of involvement, Clardy reportedly admitted to officers that he murdered Howland after a disagreement in his home, where she had been working as a sex worker. He admitted to spreading the victim's remains throughout the St. Louis and Warren counties. He is currently being held on a bond of $1 million in Warren County as the investigation continues. The announcement of the indictment by the major case squad of Greater St. Louis marked a significant breakthrough in a joint investigation between multiple law enforcement agencies. If found guilty, Clardy may face a lengthy prison sentence of up to 40 years. Finally, the truth is being unveiled and justice may finally be served for Deanna Howland nearly 2 decades later. After the heart-wrenching news of her untimely death, Howland's loved ones never lost hope that the perpetrator of the heinous crime would one day be brought to justice. And finally, after years of tireless investigation, Clardy was apprehended and the veil of mystery surrounding Howland's murder was lifted. As the sheriff's office released details of the case, the community was left in shock and disbelief, learning of the DNA evidence and other gruesome details that had been withheld for years. Though they will never have her back, her friends and family can find solace in the fact that justice has finally been served. At a press conference in St. Louis, Deanna Howland's daughter, Kinnear, expressed her gratitude towards everyone who had taken an interest in her mother's story. It was an emotional moment as she thanked the crowd for their support and for not giving up on her mother's case. Kinnear revealed how she always knew that something had happened to her mother and that she would never have abandoned her family without a word. She appreciated the fact that people were interested in getting to know who her mother was and the impact she would have had on their lives if she were still alive. It is clear that Deanna was a kind and devoted woman who meant the world to her loved ones. Kinnear's words touched the hearts of many, reminding us all of the importance of not forgetting the lives of those lost and the loved ones they leave behind. The case of Deanna Howland is a tragic reminder of the impact that violent crimes can have on individuals, families, and communities. The arrest and confession of Clardy may bring closure to those affected by Howland's murder, but it can never fully undo the harm that was done. Ultimately, it is up to the justice system to hold the perpetrator accountable for their actions. The case of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. Grant Hendrickson, born on September 20th, 1972, in Macon, Georgia, was an outdoor enthusiast who enjoyed fishing, golf, canoeing, and camping. Like his girlfriend, he was also an active volunteer in the community, having worked at the Museum of Arts and Sciences in Macon since the age of 15. Their active lifestyles likely drew them together. According to those who knew them, Grant's girlfriend, Michelle Cartagena, was born on May 2nd, 1975, in Monterey, California. She was a well-rounded and talented individual. She played in her school's marching orchestra band, was the top singles tennis player, and led her school's softball team. Additionally, she was a member of the National Honor Society. Outside of school, Michelle volunteered with the Red Cross and an animal welfare association, and she often visited elderly people. Her father remembered her as a caring and driven individual who aimed to pursue a career in medicine to help others and give back to society. January 3rd, 1995, brought a grim discovery to the typically quiet area of Juliet Lake. A passerby reported finding 2 lifeless bodies while walking near the lake. The local sheriff and his deputy responded to the scene where they were met with a shocking sight. Their office was not accustomed to handling serious crimes as fights and thefts were the norm. The deputies were not prepared for what they found. A white Honda parked on the lake shore with the body of a man inside and her body lying on the ground nearby. The cause of death was evident even to a non-expert. Both victims had been shot. The car contained the victims' personal belongings, including identification, which revealed the identities of the victims. The male victim was 22-year-old Grant Hendrickson, who was found in the driver's seat. The second victim was 19-year-old Michelle Cartagena. The police were alerted to the incident and officers from the Major Crimes Unit, along with forensic experts, arrived at the lake. The detective's attention was immediately drawn to Michelle's body, which was partially exposed with her skirt pulled up, suggesting a possible motive for the crime. An examination of the car revealed bullet holes, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator had opened fire on them while they were inside. Grant was hit by 3 bullets and had no chance of survival. Michelle was shot twice and likely remained conscious as the perpetrator pulled her from the car. The position of Michelle's body, with her legs spread apart, suggested that the perpetrator may have intended to take advantage of her vulnerable state, but did not do so. Forensic experts found a substance on the inside of her thighs, which was later identified as saliva containing chewing tobacco particles. The saliva samples were sent to the lab for further analysis. During the crime scene investigation, police discovered important evidence including bullet casings of 2 different calibers, 13.223 caliber casings and 4.9mm casings. The presence of 2 types of ammunition suggests that there may have been 2 perpetrators, each using a different weapon. The families of Grant and Michelle were shocked and stunned when they learned about the tragedy. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous act against their children. As only children, Grant and Michelle were extremely close to their parents. They had been dating for over a year and had already made plans for their future together, including their upcoming wedding. When detectives couldn't identify any enemies or suspects through family and friends, they began investigating further. They visited Mercer University in Macon, where Grant and Michelle were classmates, to gather more information and piece together the events surrounding the tragedy. The police investigation into the deaths of Michelle and Grant was ongoing, but they had not uncovered any significant leads. Both victims were well-liked and respected at the university, with no known conflicts or enemies. Initially, Detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have been a man who had romantic feelings for Michelle and was rejected, but this theory was not substantiated and was eventually set aside. The visit to Mercer University did not yield any useful information for the police. However, by reconstructing the events of January 2nd, the detectives learned that Michelle and Grant had gone to a restaurant, followed by a movie. After the film, they headed to a holiday camp at Juliet Lake. The camp was open to the public 24/7 and featured a boat launch, parking area, small dock, and picnic tables. Since it was a free public space, there was no staff or security present on the night of the crime. Other people were in the area, but they did not report anything suspicious. Some individuals did hear loud noises, which they initially dismissed as firecrackers. A witness reported seeing a 1980s Honda CRX speeding out of the parking lot. Meanwhile, investigators found a DNA sample in saliva on Michelle's thigh. However, at the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages. The DNA Identification Act, which allowed the FBI to create a national DNA database, was not passed until 1994. As a result, there was no database to compare the DNA sample to, and it could only be matched by directly comparing it to the perpetrator's DNA. The investigation also included questioning staff at the restaurant and cinema that Grant and Michelle visited before their deaths, but nothing suspicious was found. The authorities considered the possibility that they might have been random victims or had a chance encounter with someone who became violent. The detectives found no evidence of any other motives, as they had good grades, no connections to shady individuals, and did not use illicit substances. The fact that the perpetrator left behind valuables, including money, suggests that the motive behind the crime was not financial gain, but rather something else. Forensic analysis revealed that the likely weapons used in the crime were an AR-15 rifle and a 9mm Ruger pistol. Despite questioning over 100 individuals and collecting DNA samples from several dozen potential suspects, the investigation had stalled. More than a year and a half after the crime, Agent Randy Upton of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation took over the case in the fall of 1996. Randy adopted a new approach, shifting his focus from identifying the perpetrator to locating the weapon used in the crime. He visited the largest gun store in Macon and requested a list of customers who had purchased an AR-15 rifle between 1985 and 1995. Investigator Randy started contacting individuals on the list of 108 potential suspects. He explained to them that cooperating by allowing their weapon to be inspected and providing a DNA sample would greatly aid the investigation. Most of the people Randy spoke with agreed to comply, which led to the experts conducting further tests. As a result, the list of suspects began to dwindle. On November 27, 1996, Randy contacted Andrew Allen Cook, a 22-year-old who was on the list. During their conversation, Randy informed Andrew of the purpose of the call and asked permission to examine his rifle. However, Andrew claimed he no longer owned the rifle, stating that he had sold it in April 1994, nearly a year before the victims, Grant and Michelle, died. Nonetheless, gun store records showed that this was not possible as Andrew had actually purchased the rifle in August 1994. Agent Randy became suspicious when Andrew lied to him. When Randy asked Andrew for a DNA sample, Andrew claimed he needed to discuss it with his father simultaneously, an FBI agent, before complying. Instead, Andrew hung up. This evasive behavior made Randy think that Andrew might be the person he was searching for. Investigations revealed that 5 months after Grant and Michelle's murders in 1995, Andrew pawned his rifle at a local gun store. Additionally, in December 1993, someone had bought a Ruger pistol on Andrew's behalf because he was underage at the time. Andrew sold this pistol to a friend in July 1995, shortly after pawning his rifle. This sequence of events suggested that Andrew's decision to get rid of both his rifle and pistol within 6 months of the murders was unlikely to be a coincidence. As the police gathered more information about Andrew, they became increasingly confident that they were on the right track. Further investigation revealed that Andrew had not only disposed of his firearms, but also his 1987 Honda CRX, which matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. Agent Randy decided to visit the diaper factory where Andrew worked. Although Andrew was absent, Randy spoke with one of his co-workers. A colleague of Andrew's reported that they had recently discussed the worst things they had ever done, and Andrew claimed to have shot someone with a rifle. The colleague was skeptical but asked Andrew why he had done it, and Andrew replied that he wanted to see if he could get away with it. The colleague also mentioned that Andrew was a frequent user of chewing tobacco. Another friend testified that Andrew had told him in late November 1996 that he needed to leave town because things were getting hot. These coincidences caught the attention of Agent Randy, who began searching for Andrew Cook, who had not lived with his parents for several years. On December 4, 1996, Agent Randy met with Andrew's father, John, who was also an FBI agent with 29 years of experience. Agent Randy explained that he was investigating the crime at Juliet Lake and wanted to speak with Andrew, but couldn't find him. John was familiar with the case of Grant and Michelle from the news, but had not been involved in the investigation. He told Agent Randy that he didn't consider Andrew a suspect. John Cook's world was turned upside down when his son revealed a shocking truth. A detective had been searching for Andrew in connection with a crime at Juliet Lake, and John had asked his son if he knew anything about it. Andrew's response was devastating. "Daddy, I'm not telling you. You're one of them. You're a cop." John's next question was laced with hope that his son would deny any involvement. "Were you the one who did the shooting?" he asked. After a brief pause, Andrew confirmed his worst fears, saying yes. Andrew explained that he had been fishing at Juliet Lake on the night of the incident. A couple had arrived, and he had gotten into an argument with the driver, Grant. According to Andrew, Grant had threatened him with a pistol, prompting Andrew to grab his rifle and commit an irreversible act. John urged his son to turn himself into the authorities, but Andrew refused, saying he would rather disappear. John was stunned by his son's confession, but he maintained his professional composure. The next day, he visited the Lenoi County Sheriff's Office and reported his son's confession. At the time, no one was aware that Andrew had been arrested earlier that morning in a nearby county for illegally hunting deer in Turkey. He had given a false name, but his true identity was quickly discovered by Agent Randy. Randy then traveled to Jones County to speak with Andrew. Unbeknownst to Randy, Andrew had already confessed everything to his father the day before. When Randy arrived at the Jones County Sheriff's Office, he introduced himself and asked Andrew if he would be willing to answer a few questions. Andrew responded, "It's been 2 years and you still don't have any evidence. I used to own a Honda, a rifle, and a Ruger, but now you're just trying to frame me." Andrew told the sheriff that if they helped his father get a lawyer, he would reveal the entire truth. After being transferred to Lenoi County, Andrew's father, John, was allowed a private conversation with him. When John hugged his son, both men broke down in tears. Andrew confessed to his father that he wasn't at the lake to fish on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed to have arrived after the victims, Grant and Michelle, were already there. Andrew's story went that he had fired multiple shots from his rifle, then used his pistol to fire additional shots. He then pulled Michelle's body out of the car in an attempt to mislead the police. As an extra precaution, Andrew spat on Michelle to prevent the police from linking him to the crime through saliva analysis. Andrew was subsequently charged with the murders of Grant Hendrickson and Michelle Cartagena. The police gathered additional evidence to support his confession, including tracing the ownership of the rifle and pistol used in the crime. Forensic examination of the guns confirmed that they were indeed the ones used to kill Michelle and Grant. Andrew Cook's DNA was matched to the saliva found on Michelle's body, further implicating him in the crime. The trial took place in 1998, during which John Andrew's father, spoke and apologized to the families of the victims, Grant and Michelle. He acknowledged that his apologies would not bring them peace and expressed regret for not recognizing the evil that had consumed his son. Andrew Cook was found guilty on March 19, 1998, and was sentenced to death. He exhausted all his appeals, and the execution was scheduled for February 22, 2013. However, 3 days before the scheduled execution, Andrew's attorneys filed a clemency appeal, arguing that he was mentally unstable and required treatment. The State Board of Pardons and Paroles considered the appeal but ultimately voted against clemency. On February 22, 2013, Andrew Cook's family visited him in prison to bid their final farewell. Before his execution, he was granted the opportunity to choose his last meal, which consisted of a steak, baked potatoes, fried shrimp, lemon pie, and soda. As he lay strapped to a gurney in the death chamber, Andrew delivered his final words, expressing remorse for his actions. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive me, as I struggle to forgive myself." He then thanked his family for their unwavering support and apologized for the pain he had caused them, stating, "I'm sorry I took so much from you all." At 11:08 p.m., the lethal injection was administered. 14 minutes later, Andrew Cook, 38, was pronounced dead. Following the execution, Mary Hendrickson, the mother of one of the victims, expressed relief that justice had finally been served after 18 long years. The Blissfield Township in Michigan is a mix of rural and suburban living. With a population of 3,905, it is a close-knit and conservative farming community with acres of surrounding cornfields. It is tucked away between bigger towns, giving residents a sanctuary away from the fast-paced life of the 21st century. It is here the mystery of the John Doe in the cornfield begins. In the early hours of November 19, 1997, a Lenoi County farmer went down to inspect his cornfield as he made preparations to cut the stalks down for the harvest. There had been some light snow the previous evening, but not enough to damage any crops. As he made his way closer to the edge of the field, he noticed a bulge on the ground that was covered by a light dusting of snow. As he drew closer, he realized he was staring down at a dead body. However, the body was missing its head and both hands. Extremely shaken by what he had seen, he contacted the police, who arrived at the farm with haste. When forensic teams arrived, they quickly determined the body had been dumped here a while ago and that it was male. It had already begun decomposing with insect and animal activity, contributing to the further degradation of the body. The area was searched for evidence, but nothing was found. It was becoming clear to investigators that it was a homicide, and a violent one too. It was also clear the crime had occurred in a different place, and the remains were dumped in the cornfield, as there were no traces of blood surrounding the body like there would have been if its limbs had been removed in the field. Also, the Section 22 roadway of Blissfield Township was just 50 yards away from the crime scene, giving people easy access to the space. The body was taken to the coroner's office for further examination. There were no distinguishing marks, such as scars, tattoos, or birthmarks anywhere on the body. The medical examiner estimated that the murder occurred within the last 3 months due to the state of decomposition. Looking closely at the wounds made from the dismemberment, the examiner noted that the victim's body parts had been sawed off. There were saw striations around the neck bones and wrist bones. The examiner believed that it was clearly an attempt to hinder investigators in identifying the victim. The coroner was able to gather some basic information based on tissue samples and estimations. He determined the victim to be light-skinned, of Hispanic descent, and between the ages of 20 to 40. The estimated height of the victim was between 5 feet 8 inches and 5 feet 10 inches with a weight of around 150 pounds. Investigators set out to find answers. Without a head or hands, there was no way to ascertain the identity of the victim. They searched missing persons databases and questioned people from the area. A theory that did take hold was that the victim was a part of a drug deal gone wrong. A few locals alleged that a drug deal had recently occurred nearby in Toledo, Ohio. Investigators followed up on that lead, but it led nowhere. Another tip was received from an anonymous source early during the investigation in 1997. The caller told investigators that the body may have belonged to a man known only as Roberto. Roberto was described as a Hispanic male between the ages of 20 to 50 with dark hair and a mustache. According to the source, Roberto was from Texas. He was also married and a father. Roberto was allegedly on a trip to Chicago when he disappeared. They were also told that Roberto had a house somewhere between McAllen and Weslaco in Texas, where he raised chickens. Using this information, investigators entered these details into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Systems known as NAMOS. A A composite sketch was developed and circulated to local news outlets, but sadly, this lead ended up going nowhere in the end. The pressure of solving the case started to grow on investigators, but unable to locate the head and hands, they were left chasing shadows. Over the years, they looked into the case, trying to find new leads, but nothing seemed to ever actually go anywhere. Eventually, the body was given the placeholder name of Lenoi County John Doe and buried in a pauper cemetery in 1997. 2 years later, in September 1999, a DNA profile of the victim was developed, but it did not lead investigators anywhere at the time. It was uploaded to the NamUs database, but there was still no positive identification. For a time, the investigation went cold again, as no one came forward with any new information. In 2016, the case became active once again. Police were investigating drug-related crimes in the area and believed there to be suspected links to the John Doe case. However, nothing panned out at the time. Then, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the John Doe case was put on the back burner for a while. But the development of a new cold case unit in 2022 brought the Lenoi County John Doe case back into the spotlight. The unit was made up of state police detectives as well as criminal justice students and faculty members from Michigan State University. After much investigation and reconstruction of the crime, there finally was a breakthrough in the case. 25 years after the murder in 2023, Michigan authorities announced that 2 Ohio men were arrested in connection with the 1997 John Doe case. An arrest warrant was issued on January 17, 2023, for brothers Ricardo Sepulveda, aged 51 from Cincinnati, and Michael Sepulveda, aged 49 from Toledo. The 2 men were arrested on the same day the arrest warrant was issued by U.S. Marshals, who had been assisting with the investigation. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel thanked the teams for their persistence in following up the leads on the case and making the arrests. Michigan State Police worked with multiple local and federal law enforcement agencies and prosecutors to gather evidence and establish a timeline of events. I am grateful for their persistence in pursuing this case. All crime victims deserve justice, regardless of how long it takes to receive it, said Nessel in a news release. No information has yet been released on how investigators narrowed down the search to both Sepulveda brothers, but it is alleged a possible drug debt incident may have been the contributing factor. Both Ricardo Sepulveda and his brother Michael have been on police radar since early on in the investigation, said Sergeant Larry Rothman, who headed the cold case unit. These guys have been on our radar, so to speak, since early on, based on the dealings that they've had in the Toledo area with narcotics and drugs. That's how they are probably connected to our victim through the drug trade, said Rothman. One of the leads, said Rothman, had come from a woman in the Upper Peninsula who recalled a slaying that had followed a similar pattern. Both men were extradited to Lenoi County, with Michael waiving his right to extradition, while Ricardo underwent a hearing with the Michigan Attorney General. If convicted, they will face several charges that carry life sentences, including first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The other charges include assault with intent to maim, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence, which all carry a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison each. Although the 2 suspects are in custody, the investigation remains ongoing. Rothman said it was still early in the investigation, but the arrest could be the key to the case. It's still early in the investigation, so there's not a whole lot I can say. But we feel these 2 guys knew the victim. They were acquaintances at one point. The John Doe still remains unidentified, but investigators are working with crime labs and genealogy databases to find answers. The DNA profile from 1999 has been uploaded to several genealogy websites, with investigators hoping for a positive result. Rothman called genetic genealogy testing a breakthrough in solving crimes. The potential to be able to solve decades-old cases that we didn't have before with genealogy and technology is kind of a breakthrough thing, he said. Sergeant Rothman said there were still a few things out there they were trying to piece together, and there is the possibility that more people could be charged in connection with the murder. We're hoping other people come forward. There's no doubt that other people from the time period know some things, he said. Someone's potentially missing a dad. Someone's potentially missing a husband. There's somebody out there, and we believe this person might be from Texas, and someone's missing their loved one, and they have no clue where they went. They just know they left in 1997 and never returned," said Rothman. With the advancements in technology and the use of genetic genealogy in solving cases that would have otherwise been forgotten, answers to long-lost mysteries are now being found. In highlighting these cases, we hope that we can aid investigations by bringing awareness to a wider audience. Information regarding who to contact in this case will be left in the description box. If you or anyone you know has been missing a loved one, please use the platforms available to contact your local authorities with any information that can help solve a case. The case of Christa Baker Alexander. Christa Ann Baker was born on November 27, 1983, in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, to Pastor Winford Baker and Patty Ann Baker. She was the youngest of 3 children with 2 older brothers. When Christa was 8 years old, her family moved to Obota Springs, Louisiana, where they built a church and actively participated in its activities. Growing up, Christa traveled extensively with Christian missionary organizations to help those in need, particularly children. She was homeschooled and later pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at the North Tennessee Bible Institute. Christa's passion was serving others, especially children, and she hoped to start her own family one day. However, her faith took priority, and she dreamed of finding a husband who shared her values. Christa adhered to traditional values and chose to save herself for marriage, only dating with the intention of finding a lifelong partner. During this time, she developed close friendships, including one with Candi Alexander, a fellow youth pastor who shared her passion for missionary work. Candi was a charismatic and well-liked individual in his community. Their families met through the church and maintained a good relationship. Cudi had been friends with Christa for many years before he asked her father, Winford Baker, for permission to marry her. Her father happily agreed. During their courtship, Cudi and Christa followed church traditions and refrained from intimate contact. Christa had even told her parents that she wanted to save her first kiss with Cudi for their wedding day. While Christa helped her parents at church, Cudi was pursuing a career as a paramedic. A year later, they decided to get married. On March 1, 2008, they exchanged vows in front of their families and church members. The wedding was a joyful celebration, and Christa was a beautiful bride. However, their happiness was short-lived. Just 4 months after the wedding, tragedy struck. On June 29, 2008, Cudi returned home from a night shift at around 6 a.m. to find Christa lying face down on the floor. She was dead. Cudi immediately called the police. Christa's body was found near the front door with no signs of a struggle. A bullet wound was discovered in the back of her head with burn marks on her skin indicating that the shot was fired at close range. The gunshot wound suggested that the gun was positioned at the back of Christa's head when the shot was fired. A 9mm shell casing was found on the floor next to her body. Initially, investigators thought the crime might have been a botched robbery. It was possible that someone broke into the house, assuming it was empty, and then killed Christa to avoid leaving a witness. Police had thoroughly searched the house. A jewelry box was found on the bed. The gun cabinet had been forced open, and Christa's purse was on the kitchen table, showing signs of having been rummaged through. Additionally, many drawers and cabinets were left open, suggesting that the perpetrator was looking for something of value. After completing their search of the house, police began interviewing individuals who had access to the property. Christa's husband, Candi Alexander, was the first person they spoke with. However, he was too distraught to answer questions immediately, and investigators had to wait for him to compose himself. Once he was able to speak, Cudi reported that everything had seemed normal the previous night before he left for his overnight shift as an emergency medical technician with Cadden Ambulance. He told that he called Christa multiple times throughout the night, but she didn't answer her phone. He also sent her several text messages, which she didn't respond to. Assuming she was just tired and had fallen asleep, he didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home the next morning, he was met with a disturbing scene. The front door was slightly open, and upon entering, he found their belongings scattered everywhere and Christa lying on the floor with a fatal gunshot wound to the head. He immediately checked her pulse and confirmed that she was dead. Panicked, he called 911 right away. The investigators were tasked with determining who could have entered the house while he was at work. It was possible that the perpetrator waited until Christa was alone before striking. They also explored the possibility that Christa may have let the killer into the house herself, as there were no signs of a struggle on her body or in the house. This suggested that she may have known her attacker and didn't feel threatened until it was too late. Cudi informed the investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. What made the situation even more tragic was that Christa was 17 weeks pregnant, meaning that not only had he lost his wife, but also their unborn child. Cudi was overcome with grief and struggled to come to terms with the loss, unsure of how to move forward with his life. The case involved 2 victims, not one. The crime scene appeared unusual to investigators. The house was messy, but it didn't seem like the result of a typical burglary. Cabinets and drawers were open, but there was no evidence of rummaging or searching for specific items. It was as if the perpetrator wanted to mislead the police. The jewelry box was also open, but the jewelry was still intact, which raised suspicions. Christa's purse was open, yet all its valuable contents remained. The police noted that 2 firearms were missing from the house, but this was unusual because there were more firearms in the house that were not taken. This led investigators to wonder why the perpetrator didn't take all the available firearms. Based on these observations, investigators concluded that the crime scene was staged. It appeared that the perpetrator intended to kill Christa Alexander and then make it look like a robbery. As a result, the police began interviewing their neighbors to gather more information. This led to an unexpected lead in the case. Mathis Rabel, the 69-year-old neighbor and was landlord of the Alexanders, described they as quiet and recently married. They were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Mavis remembered Christa Alexander as a kind and helpful woman who rarely went outside without her husband. Mavis last saw they on Saturday afternoon when Cudi Alexander was collecting the bodies of turtles he had shot in his backyard pond. This led investigators to discover that Cudi owned a gun. However, when police searched the Alexanders' home, they did not find a gun. Cudi claimed that only a rifle and a shotgun had been stolen from the house, but he never mentioned a handgun. Detectives suspected that Cudi might be hiding something. They searched the pond area and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. These casings were similar to the one found near Christa's body. The police sent the casings to the state crime lab for analysis. The lab report confirmed that the gun Cudi used to shoot the turtles was the same gun used to shoot Christa. Investigators summoned Cudi to the police station for further questioning regarding his wife's death. He maintained that it was impossible for him to have committed the crime. Cudi explained that he had left for work at 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned home the next morning at 6 a.m., providing an alibi that he was working throughout the night. Upon verification, Cudi's colleagues corroborated his claim, stating that he was indeed present at work all night. When inquired about the firearm, Cudi revealed that he owned a gun but claimed to have sold it the day prior to the incident to an unknown man named Steve. The alleged buyer had paid $500 in cash, which made verifying this claim difficult. According to Cudi, Steve was described as a white male in his mid-30s, around 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old Toyota pickup truck. Christa's parents shared their concerns with investigators, stating that they didn't believe Cudi's account of events. Her father, Winford Baker, noted that Cudi showed little emotional response to Christa's death, a behavior that had started a few months before their wedding. They had been experiencing financial difficulties since moving in together, and the impending arrival of their child was likely to add to their struggles. Christa's parents also suspected that Cudi was having an affair with a colleague who had even attended their wedding. Christa had confided in friends just weeks before her death that she suspected Cudi was cheating on her. As investigators dug deeper into the marriage, they became increasingly convinced that Cudi and Christa had different visions for their future. However, was this enough motive for Cudi to take Christa's life, especially given that she was carrying their unborn child? The police had one lead, a man named Steve, who Cudi claimed had bought the gun used to kill Christa. Investigators set out to find Steve using the description provided by Cudi. Meanwhile, they brought Cudi in for further questioning, asking him to provide a detailed account of his activities before, during, and after work on the day of Christa's death. This time, his story differed from his initial statement. The investigators found several inconsistencies in Cody's story. He failed to mention a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house, and to whom he had sold a gun. Additionally, while on duty, Cody showed no concern for his pregnant wife Christa's well-being when she didn't answer his calls, despite knowing she was home alone. He could have asked a family member to check on her, but didn't. Furthermore, the crime scene appeared to have been staged, which raised suspicions about Cody's involvement. As the investigators applied pressure, Cody's story began to unravel. After several hours of interrogation, he changed his story entirely. He claimed that he had been sleeping on the couch before his night shift and that his wife had woken him up late. He stated that he wasn't angry with her for waking him up late and that it wasn't an issue. Cody then explained that he had been walking around the house with a gun, intending to take it to work because a colleague was interested in buying it. He said he was fooling around, aiming the gun at objects and making click, click noises. He approached Christa from behind, put the gun to the back of her head, and claimed that an accidental shot occurred. He maintained that it was an accident and that he didn't intend to harm her. When he realized Christa was dead, he was scared and didn't know what to do. Candi Alexander admitted to staging a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. He took several items from his house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work with the front door left open. His plan was for someone to discover the open door and lights on and then find his wife while he was at work. However, this plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander threw a pistol and other items, including his wife's jewelry, out of the car window. By the time he arrived at work, the only items left in the car were a DVD player and a Sony radio. He gave the DVD player to a colleague, Allison Sharp, with whom he had been having an affair. Alexander and Sharp kissed and held hands before and after his wedding, spending one night at a Baton Rouge hotel. While his wife Christa was at church camp, he took Sharp to a hotel for a jacuzzi evening with fine china plates, meal, and wine amidst supposed financial difficulties with his low salary of $11 per hour and stalled professional certification efforts. County and his pregnant wife, Christa, were struggling financially and unemployed, and on top of that, their washing machine had broken. But Alexander managed to come up with money for a romantic evening at Callaway Inn with his mistress, Sharp. Police later determined that a shocking act unfolded in the home, contradicting Cody's initial claim that Christa's death was accidental. Detectives found it difficult to prove direct involvement, but believed Cody's explanation was suspicious. Despite the challenges, police were convinced that Christa's death was not an accident, and Cody's actions raised more questions than answers. After the police arrested Candi Alexander, Christa's parents were able to find the strength to forgive him. The Baker family came together to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter and what would have been their fourth grandchild. Christa's father, Winford Baker, remembered her fondly, saying she was a sweet and lovely person. Christa had made a significant impact on those around her, having completed 17 mission trips during her lifetime. Winford Baker recalled a conversation he had with Cody shortly before his arrest. Although it was brief, Baker described the encounter as emotional, saying, "We hugged and cried together." Despite his desire for justice, Baker stated that he had already forgiven Cody. "We forgave him even before we knew who was responsible," he said. Baker found comfort in knowing that Christa was now in a better place, saying, "She's with the Lord, in heaven, and at peace." The trial started on August 2, 2009. Prosecutors claimed that Cody's behavior after Christa's death implied that he had acted on purpose. They wondered why he didn't call 911 right away if the shooting was truly an accident. Instead, faked a robbery and left Christa's body for 12 hours before going home and calling 911. Prosecutors also questioned Cody's story that the shooting was accidental, noting that he was an experienced gun owner who had received proper training from his father. Candi Alexander, 24, was charged with second-degree murder for the death of his wife. Christa Cudi had admitted to being involved in her death, which he claimed was a result of his poor decision-making. After initially going to trial, Cudi suddenly changed his plea to guilty, ending jury deliberations. This unexpected turn of events came about when Christa's family agreed to a plea deal that had been proposed earlier. Alexander was sentenced to 55 years in prison in August 2009. Today's case will take us to Birmingham, a city in the metropolitan county of the West Midlands in England. With a population of more than 1 million people, it is the second largest city in the United Kingdom. It's also known as the City of 1,000 Trades, due to its status as the world's first manufacturing town. Birmingham is famous not only for its manufacturing routes, but also well known for its heritage in the world of food and cuisine, legendary rock music, and bustling nightlife. Nova was born in 1957 in Jamaica. She was not an only child, but had a younger sister by the name of Valerie. Nova grew up into a carefree and happy child whom everyone in the neighborhood couldn't help but love. Nova was a lovely person, always happy and smiling, said Nova's best friend Lorna Edmond. When Nova was 10 years old, her mother Lorna Welsh decided to move to the United Kingdom in search of greener pastures. It was quite a tough decision as it meant she had to leave behind the people and place they had become so familiar with. However, the desire to give her girls the best in life helped her to remain resolved to leave the country. Not long after making the decision, Lorna and her daughters traveled to the UK and began their lives afresh. Life in the United Kingdom was very different from what they were used to, but as time went on, the family adjusted and settled well into their new environment. When Nova was around the age of 16, she met and fell in love with Osmond Bell, a young boy who was also the same age as her. In no time, they both started a romantic relationship. Perhaps Nova was simply blinded by love, or perhaps she only wanted her independence. But a few months down the line, she made known her intention to leave home. She told her mother that she and Osmond had decided to begin living together. It is not clear if Lorna approved of this decision or not, but regardless, eventually moved and went to live with Osmond. 2 years later, Nova and Osmond welcomes their first child. It was a boy, and they named him Jonathan. 4 years later, they had another son, and he was given the name Lee. Nova was a devoted mother to her young sons and loved them wholeheartedly. To provide for themselves as well as their children, the couple took up different jobs. Nova worked as a part-time cleaner while Osmond was a builder. Life seemed to be going at a pretty good pace, but sadly, things would not stay the same. At some point, the love between Nova and Osmond began to deteriorate. The spark that had been there at the beginning of their relationship gradually faded. The consequence of this was that the couple began to quarrel more frequently. It became common for neighbors to hear the sound of the couple's noisy fights in their apartment located in the Ladywood area. Their disagreements also sometimes escalated into violence, with Osmond hitting her and leaving her with bruises. With each passing day, Nova became increasingly unhappy in her relationship, and she confided in her younger sister Valerie, as well as some close friends, about what she was going through. In the end, she made up her minds to give love a chance with someone else. She told Osmond that she was no longer interested in the relationship, but despite her ending things, Osmond was not ready to let her go. In May 1981, Nova met a man by the name of Wayne Newby, and they both got into a relationship. As their romance progressed, Wayne would sometimes visit her at her home. This did not sit well with Osmond, and it gave him more reasons to fight with Nova. In June 1981, Nova's stepsister, Sonia, visited her for a few days. During this period, Sonia witnessed one of their fights and how ugly it could get. On that particular day, Sonia had been in the living room when she heard a scream from the direction of the kitchen. It was unmistakably Nova's voice, and she quickly ran to the kitchen to find out what was wrong. What she saw alarmed her. Nova was down on the floor, while Osmond stood angrily over her with a dishcloth wrapped around his hands. In the moments that followed, Sonia made it clear that she would call the police, but Osmond tried to stop her from taking this action. When police officers later arrived at the house, they asked what had happened, and Nova was the one who did the explaining. She told them that she and Osmond had been arguing and she wanted him to leave the house. She never told police that the real reason why they had argued was because she had gone out the previous night and Osmond had not been pleased about this. He had confronted her when she got back from her outing and things had escalated from there, with him grabbing her by the neck and trying to strangle her. After Nova was done talking, officers moved to where Osmond was and spoke to him. He did not argue, but packed his bags and left the house. It was a moment of relief for Nova, and she knew that things would become less heated from that moment. She was right. With Osmond no longer around, she had the freedom to spend more time with her lover, Wayne. There was no longer the worry of having to meet an angry Osmond after getting back from a late-night outing. She also had more reasons to laugh and was generally happier. But as it turned out, Nova's newfound joy would be short-lived. On July 24, 1981, Nova took her two sons Jonathan and Lee to stay with their father, Osmond. She had earlier made plans to go dancing with Wayne and some of her friends, and because of this, she did not want to leave her two sons all alone in the house. Apart from this, she also felt like taking them over would be a great way for them to bond with their father. After dropping the boys over at Osmond's place, she made for the club, where she and Wayne had agreed to meet. That evening was fun-filled, as she made merry to her heart's content, and with Wayne by her side, she felt once again like a teenager in love. By the time she decided to leave the club, it had already gotten dark. She bade Wayne and their other friends goodbye and left for her apartment. That would be the last time any one of them would see her alive. The following morning, which was July 25, 1981, Nova's neighbors, Carmen and Wendell Turner, who lived in the flat below hers, were awoken by a noise that was coming from Nova's apartment above, and it was the familiar sound of argument that they had heard many times before. This time around, they could only hear Nova crying. On the evening of that same day, another neighbor saw Nova and would later tell the police that she appeared visibly upset about something. Almost 7 hours later, at around 12:30 a.m., Carmen and Wendell heard a loud bang from above. While contemplating what or who could have made such a noise in the middle of the night, a second bang followed. That particular one sounded like somebody kicked a door. Carmen and Wendell listened for more sound, but it never came. Without any further disturbances, they went to sleep and did not think much of the noise they had just heard until much later. July 27, 1981 was a Monday, and the residents of Birmingham went about their daily activities. However, Nova did not turn up for work on that day or the day after that. Nobody saw her and had any idea where she was. Around that time, Nova's mother Lorna and sister Valerie had permanently moved from the United Kingdom to Miami in the United States, and they had hoped that at a later date would also join them with her two children. Upon getting to Miami, they called Nova but could not reach her. This made them worried. "We were trying to reach her to confirm that we had arrived safely, but we could never get any answer," said Valerie Welsh. Nova's best friend Lorna was one of the first people to notice that she was missing. Lorna knew that it was unlike her friend to refuse to pick up the phone and not show up for several days. She, however, believed there was a tangible reason for all that was happening. After thinking things through, she made up her minds to pay Nova a visit to see what was wrong. Upon reaching Nova's apartment, she discovered that the door was locked, and no matter how hard she knocked or called Nova's name, she got no response. She found it all very strange and wondered if her friend had left the country without telling anyone. Something else caught her attention and made her realize that not all was well. Some clothes which Nova had washed were hanging on the line. It was unlike Nova to leave her clothes out in the open after they had dried, and this was something Lorna was well aware of. As a last resort and to confirm her fears, she reached out to Osmond to ask if he had seen Nova, but he told her that he had not and that their two children were with him. With this, Lorna went to the police station and reported that her friend was missing. This was on August 9, 1981, 2 weeks after Nova disappeared without a trace. Police officers began searching for her immediately. They reached out to her close friends, but none of them had seen her. Osmond was also contacted and asked when he last saw her and why he had not reported her missing earlier. In response, Osmond told them that he thought she had gone off with her new boyfriend or to America with her family. On August 12, 1981, 3 days after Lorna reported Nova missing, she got a letter in her mailbox. At first, she thought it was from her relative. However, after breaking the seal and reading the content, she realized that she was wrong. According to the letter, The boyfriend of whoever had written it had seen Nova fighting with a man she had gone out with around the time of her disappearance. The letter claims that the man had grabbed and hit Nova. Lorna was confused as she had no idea who had written the letter since the person had chosen to remain anonymous. But going by what she had read, she could decipher that the person was a female. Lorna did not waste time in showing the police the letter. After going through the letters, officers focused their attention on Wayne since he was the man Nova had been going out with before she had disappeared. However, when Wayne was questioned, he maintains that he had no idea where Nova was or had gone to. On August 18, 1981, the police were called upon by Nova's neighbor to investigate a foul odor that was all over the house. Nobody knew what exactly was smelling, but it was really bad and made everyone uncomfortable. When police officers arrived at the house, they quickly realized that the smell was much stronger in a certain area, and this was upstairs at Nova's flat. They made their way there, and after discovering that the door was locked, they quickly broke it down. The stench grew more intense as they entered the house, and the officers held their hands to their noses and grimaced in disgust as they began their search for the source. The house was in disarray, and dust had settled on the furniture. Cobwebs were also visible on the ceiling, and this showed that no one had been living in the house for some time. There were stairs in the apartment, and under them was a cupboard. Officers were attracted to this part of the house because they noticed that the smell was especially stronger there. Strangely, the lock on the door of the cupboard looked broken, and a piece of chewing gum had been used to hold it in place. When officers finally opened it, they saw the decaying body of the woman that they had been looking for. She wore a nightgown and was covered by a blanket and some papers. It was a very horrifying sight, and the officers could hardly hide their shock. Nova had been rotting inside her own house all along, while the world was searching for her. An ambulance was called to the scene, and Nova's body was taken away for autopsy. The gum that was found on the cupboard door was collected as evidence by the police and stored away. The news of Nova's death soon spread around the neighborhood like wildfire. Her family in Miami were also contacted and informed about what had happened. They were heartbroken and wept for days. The results of the autopsy that was conducted on Nova's body revealed that she had died as a result of pressure on the neck. Detectives immediately launched an investigation to determine how Nova had met her end. The person at the top of the suspect list was Osmond. Detectives felt that there was something fishy about him, and so he was arrested. In the 4 days that he was held in custody, he was made to undergo a series of interrogations. But despite this, detectives got nothing tangible from him. At some point, he was also shown the mysterious letter that Lorna, Nova's friend, had received and was asked if he knew anything about it. He told them that he knew nothing about the letter. Since there was no further reason to continue holding him at the station, he was allowed to go home. After this, detectives continued the investigation and even went as far as asking the public for information regarding Nova's death. But they got nothing and the case went cold. Nova was soon laid to rest, and life went on. But the pain her death brought stayed on with her family, and for a long time they wondered who had killed her. Years went by, and the world of forensic science became more sophisticated. Complex DNA techniques that seemed like a pipe dream at the time of Nova's death became possible due to advances in technology. In 2014, detectives decided to take another look at the case. This time, they focused on the chewing gum that had been used to seal the cupboard in which Nova's body was found. The gum had been preserved over the years, and detectives knew it would contain the DNA of whoever had used it to hold the cupboard's door in place. They believed that whoever it turned out to be was likely Nova's murderer. A test was soon run on the gum and DNA was recovered. Upon further analysis, detectives discovered that it was a match to none other than Osmond. The gum wasn't the only detail that was tested for DNA. The seal of the letter Lorna received back in 1981 was also sent to the lab for testing, and Osmond's DNA was also found on it. This meant only one thing. He had written the letter to divert attention away from himself. With the solid evidence, detectives knew that they had finally cornered Osmond. He was soon arrested and charged with the arrest of his Nova. During subsequent interrogations after the arrest, Osmond maintained his innocence and even gave reasons as to why his DNA was on the gum and letter seal. For the gum, he said that he had been running a laundry business in the past, and he occasionally used the cupboard where Nova's body was found. At some point, long before Nova died, the cupboard lock had been broken and he had used the gum to hold it in place. For the letter, he claimed that he had come into contact with it back in 1981 when he was being interrogated for the murder. What I do remember is being left in a room with a letter and envelope on the table for several minutes. I remember thinking at the time, perhaps I am being observed, and they only came back in after I took the letter up and had a look at it. I read it and left it on the table. Osmond had explained as regards to how his DNA had gotten on the letter. Since Osmond kept insisting that he had no hand in Nova's death, the case eventually went to trial. After 6 weeks of trial, he was cleared of murder, since there was no evidence to show that the killing had been premeditated. However, he was convicted of manslaughter and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. This sentencing was on March 22, 2017. Nova's family were satisfied with the outcome of the trial. Finally, after 36 long years, Nova can rest in peace. The family can now have closure, knowing the person who took Nova's life has been brought to justice, Nova's mother Lorna said. Nova's sister Valerie also said the family had forgiven Osmond for what he did. We forgive him, but he still needs to pay for what he's done. He never admitted to that, said Valerie. Lorna, Nova's best friend, was also relieved that her killer had been brought to justice. I often think about the old times and the things we used to do. I still miss Nova and only hope that her family can now find peace. Nova can rest in peace knowing that justice has been done. I'll never forget her. Till we meet again, Nova. Love, your friend, Lorna. Nova's case is indeed a sad one, as she never got to see her children grow into adults. There is the relief that her killer has been finally brought to justice despite how long it took. Case of Anu Singh. A man named Sam, who lived with his wife and son in Melbourne, Australia, came to his home in the state of Kerala, India, to visit his parents in October 2015. However, before returning to Melbourne, he told his parents and some relatives, maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin. Surprisingly, 3 days later, news arrived that Sam had died. Everyone wonders how someone could predict their own death. But when the true story came to light, 2 major cities in different countries were shaken. So what was the full story behind this case? Let's dive into the details. In 2015, a 34-year-old man named Sam Abraham lived with his wife Sophia and their 7-year-old son in Epping, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia. The family had previously lived in Oman, a country in West Asia, but they moved to Melbourne because it is considered the most livable city in Australia. Both Sam and Sophia were employed, and the small family of 3 was happily residing in Australia. Every year, Sam would visit his home in India with his family. In October 2015, Sam and Sophia took some days off from work and came to India. One day, Sam told his father, "I feel like I won't live for much longer. Maybe I will die soon." After hearing this, Sam's father gets angry and says, "You are so young. Why are you saying such strange things?" Despite this, one day Sam tells some of his relatives, "Maybe the next time I come to India, it will be in a coffin." This remark also seemed strange to them, but everyone brushed it off as a joke. Sam had a flight back to Australia on October 11, 2015, as he and his wife had taken only a few days off from work to visit India. After this, Sam returns to Australia with his wife and son. However, just 2 days later, on the morning of October 15, 2015, Sam's father, Abraham, receives a call on the other end of the line from his daughter-in-law, Sophia, who delivers devastating news that shocked the entire Abraham family. Through tears, Sophia explains that Sam had passed away that morning due to a heart attack. Sophia, left alone in Australia, handles all the paperwork and finally gets permission to send Sam's body back to India. This process takes 2 to 3 days. And on October 18th, Sam's body arrives in Kerala, India. Along with Sam's dead body, Sophia, their 7-year-old son, and Sophia's sister Sonia also come to India. However, some of Sam's relatives, especially his father, are deeply shocked because everything Sam had said came true. The house is engulfed in grief. Sam's wife is now a widow, and their 7-year-old son has lost his father. With a heavy heart and deep sorrow, Sam's body was buried and his last rites were performed. Everyone at home was very sad, especially Sophia, whose life had taken a huge blow. Despite this, she had to return to Australia after 5 days, because they had come to India on leave from their respective jobs. If Sophia had stayed in India longer, she could have lost her job. Therefore, on October 23rd, went back to Australia with her sister Sonia and her son. However, after returning to Australia, Sophia called her in-laws every Saturday to check on how they were doing. Time passed slowly, but there wasn't a single Saturday when Sophia didn't call her in-laws. But then, suddenly, in the last week of July or the first week of August 2016, there were no calls from Sophia to India. Seeing this, Sam's family became very worried, so they called some acquaintances in Australia to get information about Sophia. What Sam's family found out was shocking. They learned that Sophia had been in the custody of the Victoria Police for the past 15 to 20 days. Additionally, Sam's family found out that Sophia was charged with murder because the police suspected that she had killed her own husband, Sam Abraham. After this revelation, Sam's family is left stunned. However, the name of another man, Aaron Kamalasainen, comes up in the story. Sam's family heard this name for the first time, and it was then that they learned whether the accusations against Sophia were true or false. On the other hand, the Victoria Police presented some evidence to Sophia and Aaron, after which both confessed to murdering Sam. Following this confession, Sophia tells the police a story that leaves them astonished. The story goes like this. In the Kollam district of the state of Kerala, there is a small village named Kavalar, where Sophia and Sam lived. In this vast state of Kerala, Kavalar is just a small village where Sam and Sophia's houses were close to each other. They knew each other since childhood because they went to school together and were in the same class. Additionally, they both had a bit of interest in music, so they sang together in the church's choir group. Not only that, but after completing high school, they also joined college together. Eventually, they fell in love during their college days and started spending their time together like a normal college couple. However, in their relationship, Sophia fell in love with another guy named Oren. Sophia neither let Sam know about Oren, nor let Oren know about Sam. But in the end, Sophia decided to marry Sam. After that, Sam first informed his family that he liked Sophia and wanted to marry her. However, Sam was standing shocked when his father said that he couldn't marry Sophia, although Sophia's father was a retired defense officer and Sophia's family was respectable in society. Sam's father still refused the marriage for some unknown reason. When Sophia found out, she threatened both Sam and her family that she would take her own life if she couldn't marry Sam. When Sam's family learned of this, they took the matter seriously and decided to let Sam and Sophia get married. Afterward, both Sam and Sophia were very happy and their wedding was celebrated with great enthusiasm. They got married in 2008, and in 2009, Sam moved to Oman with his wife Sophia because he had gotten a job at a money exchange company. However, when Sophia became pregnant, she returned to India because she needed her family's support. At that time, she gave birth to a son in India, and while staying in India, she was in constant contact with her sister. After some time, Sophia decided to move to Australia for a better life. Sophia had an MSc degree in electronics, so her sister also encouraged her, saying she should come to Australia, as she would get a great job. After seeing Sophia's resume, a company in Melbourne offered her a job, and she left for Australia with her son. Sophia arrived in Melbourne in the early months of 2012. Soon after, Sam also decided that he would move to Australia after some time. He talked to his company and got his transfer to Australia. Sam reached Australia in 2013, and their small family of 3 now lives under the same roof. The plus point of living here was that their son had grown up, and both husband and wife were working in different companies, so everything was going well in their lives. However, there was a different story behind this. Before Sophia moved to Australia, Oren had already gone there to Melbourne. Oren started working as an instrumentation engineer at a company. Oren got married there and also had a child by then. Sophia was also married and Oren had his own family, so they should not have been in contact with each other. But despite being married, Sophia and Oren continued to talk through chatting apps and calls. In fact, Sophia's main reason for moving to Australia was that Oren was there, and they could meet in person. But when Sam joined his family in Australia, it became difficult for Sophia and Oren to meet. Despite this, Sophia continued to talk to Oren secretly. One day, Sophia had the idea that if Sam were to die somehow, she could be with Oren. She shared this idea with Oren, and he liked it because he loved Sophia deeply. After that, Oren started looking for an opportunity to kill Sam. During this time, he kept a close watch on Sam's every activity, and Sophia helped him with this. Then, in February 2015, Oren finally got the chance he was waiting for. One day in February, Sam was sitting in his car, parked outside a metro station. During this time, a masked Oren approached him and attacked him with a knife, slashing his throat and cheek. However, Sam survived the attack. Unfortunately for Oren, he was not identified by the police and therefore was not caught. When Sam came home after surviving the knife attack, Sophia told Oren about it. The two then began to think of another way to kill Sam easily. They came up with many ideas on how to kill Sam, but they finally decided to use cyanide. They then started looking for cyanide, and on October 14th, Sophia mixed cyanide into Sam's orange juice and gave it to him. Sam, thinking it was just normal orange juice, drank it. Later, he lay down on his bed, but the poor Sam never got up again. Then, Sophia immediately messaged Aaron and called him to her house. The first thing Aaron checked was whether Sam was alive or dead. To make sure, Aaron forcibly poured the remaining juice from the glass into Sam's mouth. After doing this and seeing Sam, Aaron realized he was dead and left Sophia's house. Afterward, Sophia slept the whole night on the same bed with her son, where her husband's dead body was lying. As soon as morning came, she started crying loudly, and hearing Sophia's cries, some neighbors came to her house. Sam was then taken to the hospital, but upon arrival, the doctor declared him dead. On hearing this, Sophia started crying a lot, but it was all an act. During this time, Sophia called Sam's father and told him that Sam had died of a heart attack. Whenever anyone asked Sophia the cause of Sam's death, she would say they all went to sleep after dinner. But when she tried to wake Sam up in the morning, he wouldn't get up. Maybe he had a silent attack. After this, no one suspected anything, and Sophia quickly began arranging to take Sam's dead body to India. She likely knew that if an autopsy was conducted here, the cause of death would be clearly determined. Therefore, the doctors believed Sophia's story and recorded the cause of death as a heart attack in their report. And within 3 days, Sam's dead body reached India. Now, in India, no one in Sam's family suspected Sophia because she was crying a lot at Sam's funeral, which made everyone think that she was very sad about Sam's passing. There is a team of 5 people who work hard to bring you the best quality content through thorough research. If you appreciate our efforts, you can support us according to your preference by visiting the link provided in the description. Your small support will motivate us to work effectively on the channel. Thank you. Now let's continue with the story. Sam's toxicology report revealed that there was cyanide in his blood and liver causing his death. About 10 months after Sam's death. On August 12, 2016, the Victoria police arrived at Sophia and Aaron's house to arrest them. However, during the search of Sophia's house, the police found a diary. But the diary was written in Malayalam, a language spoken and written in Kerala. So the police sent it to be translated. Afterward, the trial of this case began, and then the police presented Sophia and Aaron's call recordings. Some of their chats, Sophia's diary translated into English, Aaron's recording before the judge. This was the same recording in which Aaron had told the detective that he had committed a murder by poisoning a man. According to a Melbourne-based newspaper, the diary found at Sophia's house sometimes belonged to Sophia and sometimes to both of them, and they used to write their feelings in this diary. One entry in this diary by Sophia says, "Can you hold me tight? I want to drift away in your love." In addition, Aaron had also written, "She is the best match for me, but what to do? I am sure that one day she will be mine." After this, the Supreme Court of Victoria delivered its verdict. Aaron is sentenced to 24 years, during which he will not be eligible for parole before 21 years. On the other hand, Sophia is sentenced to 22 years, during which she cannot be paroled before 18 years. However, during this trial, Sophia broke down in court and said, "I have a small son, so please reduce my sentence." But then the judge remarked, "The unfortunate part is that the biggest victim in this crime is your son, because you killed his father and now you are also going to be sentenced." After that, the court awarded custody of the child to Sophia's sister, Sonia. But later, Sam's family demanded to keep their grandson with them, and now Sam's son lives with his grandparents' family. However, there is no information about Aaron's wife and his child in this case, so we cannot say anything about them. During this time, neither Aaron's family nor Sophia's parents seem to have any hint that they know each other. So with that, the Sam Abraham murder case comes to an end. Today's case will take us to Spokane, a city located in the state of Washington in the United States. It is known for its rich cultural heritage and natural beauty, making it a popular destination for outdoor enthusiasts. With the Spokane River running through its center, the city offers a thriving downtown area with a plethora of shopping, dining, and entertainment options. The city is also famous for being the birthplace of Father's Day, and for hosting the annual Lilac Festival, which celebrates the blooming of the city's signature flower. Candi was born in the year 1950 to parents Elaine and Carl Rogers. Since she was an only child, her parents greatly cherished her. At some point, Elaine and Carl's marriage came crashing down for unknown reasons, and this caused them to get divorced and go their separate ways. However, Candi remained in the care of her mother, who was a schoolteacher at the time. Elaine ensures that she provided for her daughter as best she could. Candi was a popular face in her community, and those who knew her described her as a pleasant and friendly little girl who loved to laugh. By 1959, Candi was 9 years old and was a fourth grader at Holmes Elementary School. Like most girls within her age range, Candi also joined a youth organization known as the Bluebirds. The Bluebirds were younger members of the Camp Fire Girls, and the organization aims to provide girls with education and recreational activities so as to encourage personal growth, self-reliance, and a connection to nature. Candi got actively involved in the activities of the group, which included camping trips, community services, hiking, and a host of others. She enjoyed every moment and took on every activity with enthusiasm. Candi was growing into a smart and happy girl with a future that looked very bright, and everyone around her could see that. However, no one was expecting that a heartbreaking tragedy would soon take her away and shake the entire community to its core. On March 6, 1959, Candi returned from school to the home she shared with her mother. It was a Friday, and she looked forward to spending time with her friends the following day. However, she also had something else she wanted to do first. The Bluebirds were trying to raise funds for one of their upcoming activities, and as part of the efforts to do so, members were required to sell a variety of chocolates in their neighborhood. Candi had 7 boxes of campfire mints that she planned to sell that day. She asked her mother, Elaine, if she could leave home to do this. She was given approval. However, Elaine reminded her to not spend too much time outdoors and to return home before dark. It was a rule that Candi had always followed, but Elaine still made sure to remind her of it every time she left home. Had Elaine known that particular day would be different, she would have never let her daughter leave the house. Candi ate a quick snack of an oatmeal cookie and also played with their family dog briefly. Then she grabs the boxes of campfire mints and made her way out of the house. The time was around 4 p.m. There were several girls of her age selling chocolate from door to door that fateful afternoon, and she joins them. Nobody knows what exactly happened afterwards, but Candi never returned home. At around 5:30 p.m., Elaine began to get worried. She knew it was unlike Candi to remain outside this late. As the minutes slowly dragged by, it seemed like hours to Elaine, and she kept listening for the familiar sound of Candi's footsteps approaching the house. But they never came. At around 6 p.m., her anxiety had skyrocketed, and she was sure that something had gone wrong. She quickly informed Candi's grandfather, Stanley Newton, about the situation. Other relatives, friends, and neighbors were also informed that Candi had not returned home, and by 6:30 p.m., a small group of people were out looking for her. They began by asking people around the neighborhood if they knew where she was, and some people confirmed that they had seen her walking around earlier, clutching the boxes of campfire mints she was selling. But nobody seemed to know where exactly she could now be. Around 7 p.m., Candi's grandfather Newton and his friends were almost hit by a speeding car but managed to jump out of harm's way. The close call left them shaken, but their attention quickly returned to finding Candi as the sky darkened. Despite the difficulties of searching in the fading light, the men held on to hope that Candi would be found safe and sound before nightfall. At some point, the authorities were also notified about the missing girl, and soon police officers and sheriff's deputies also joined in the search. At around 9 p.m. that same day, a group of searchers came across some boxes of campfire mints. They were found lying across Paddock Drive, and many believed that they had been the same boxes Candi had been selling. 6 campfire mint boxes were found that night, but Candi had left home with 7. That night's search proved to be futile. There was no sign of Candi anywhere. Elaine could hardly sleep a wink throughout the night. Many thoughts raced through her mind, and she wondered if her daughter was okay. The uncertainty was just too much to bear, and she silently cried and prayed that Candi would return home safely to her. The following morning was a Saturday, and by then almost everyone in the city had gotten the news that Candi was missing. Well-meaning individuals trooped out in large numbers to begin the search for the day. Officers rode on horseback, as well as in vehicles to conduct the search. They looked through the woods and along major roads. The Air Force also assisted in the search by providing a helicopter. The aircraft was boarded by 4 trained personnel as well as 1 pilot, and they took it to the air. While flying over Spokane River, the pilot failed to see a high-tension wire until the last moment and ended up flying into it. The effect was immediate. The helicopter spiraled out of control and crashed into the Spokane River, instantly killing 3 of the 5 men on board. Airman Merles D. Ray, Sergeant William A. McDonald, and Lieutenant Kenneth G. Fautek were the 3 men who tragically lost their lives on that day. Everyone who had joined in the search for Candi was saddened by the tragic event, but it did little to discourage them from searching for her. They remained determined, and therefore intensified their efforts. None of them wanted the death of the 3 heroes to be in vain. But despite everyone's best efforts, they had no luck locating Candi for several days. It was as if she had simply vanished without a trace. With each passing day that Candi remained missing, Elaine began to look like a shadow of herself. She refused to touch her meals and would constantly stare into space, not knowing the whereabouts of her only daughter was slowly driving her insane. The burden on her heart was just too much to bear. March 22, 1956 made it 16 days that Candi had been missing, and it was the day she was found. That afternoon, 2 airmen named Howard Lawrence and Richard Bergen were out hunting woodchucks in a wooded area about 7 miles away from Candi's home. Upon getting to a small clearing in the forest, they noticed a small pair of blue suede shoes. The delicate craftsmanship of the shoes and the small size indicated that they belonged to a child. They were baffled and wondered how the shoes had gotten there, so far away from town. After looking around and waiting a while to see if anyone would come out to lay claim to the shoes, they picked them up and made their way back to base. The 2 men could not stop talking about the discovery they made in the woods, and the news soon spread like wildfire. The shoes were handed over to the police, who contacted Candi's grandfather to see if he could identify them. They had a strong suspicion that the shoes belonged to the little girl they had spent several days searching for. When Candi's grandfather saw the shoes, he told the police officers that they indeed looked similar to the ones she had worn in the past. With this confirmation, officers decided to focus their search on the area where the shoes had been found. Since it had grown dark, conducting a search would be difficult that night, and so they agreed to wait until the next morning. The following day was a Sunday, and by dawn, a team of officers and volunteers had arrived at the clearing where the shoes had been found. They immediately began looking through the area, but initially found nothing. After some time went by, one of the officers suddenly came across a small mound made up of brush and pine needles. He found it strange and decided to take a closer look. To his horror, it did not take him long to see a knee sticking out from under the pile, and he carefully brushed away the leaves to reveal the decomposing body of a child. He instantly recognized her as the little girl they had been looking for. The clothes she was wearing were torn in places, and when the officer looked at her feet, he noticed that they were bound. A torn strip of cloth had been used to do this. Also wrapped around her neck was another strip of clothing. The officer quickly alerted the other searchers, and soon after, the body was taken out of the area for an autopsy. Candi's relatives were immediately contacted and informed about the state in which she was found. Upon hearing that her daughter was dead, Elaine lost consciousness and had to be placed under sedation. More than 1,000 searchers who had volunteered their time, resources, and energy to look for Candi were shocked by the news. There was a general feeling of dread in the air, and from that moment, many people began to fear for their safety as well as their children's. The result of the autopsy that was conducted on Candi's body revealed that she had been abused and then strangled to death. Detectives from the Spokane Police Department immediately began an investigation to find out who the culprit was. "We'll put every available man on the case and keep them there till the thing is solved," Police Chief Clifford Payne had told the media at the time. "We know what we're looking for now. We're looking for a maniac," he added. A lot of individuals were questioned, but detectives were unable to get any helpful information. The first person the authorities suspected of committing the crime was an imprisoned serial killer by the name of Hugh Byron Morse, and they had good reason for believing that he had something to do with it. When the autopsy was conducted on Candi's body, a strange purple smear that smells like grape gum had been noticed on her clothes, and Morse was known for having a special liking for grape gum. But when he was asked about Candi's murder, he denied any involvement in it. Since there was no evidence to show that he was the killer they were looking for, charges could not be brought up against him. However, he remained a prime suspect in the case for a long time. Apart from him, detectives also investigated several tips that poured in after Candi's death, but none of them proved to be of any use. Candi was eventually laid to rest, and her devastated family members hoped that her killer would be brought to justice sooner than later. But several months went by after this, and the case remained a tough one for detectives to crack. In June 1963, 4 years after Candi's death, her father, Carl, sadly took his own life, unable to cope with losing his daughter. At the time, he had been living in a hotel in Walla Walla. Years went by, and Candi began to fade from the memories of many. But her family and the detectives of Spokane Police Department never forgot. This is the kind of case that's been the giant logjam for cold cases. And in Spokane, I keep saying it's the Mount Everest of our cold cases, the one that we could never seem to overcome. But at the same time, nobody ever forgot, said Detective Zach Stormont of the Spokane Police Department Major Crimes. By 2001, there had been a significant advancement in DNA technology compared to the 1950s, when it was non-existent. Candi's clothes from when her body was found have been carefully stored by the authorities as evidence. These clothes were now submitted to the lab with the hopes that the killer's DNA could be identified. Forensic investigators quickly got to work, and they were able to determine that Candi's underwear had on it. They were able to isolate DNA from this, and it was used to create a DNA profile. It was an exciting period for detectives as they felt closer than ever to solving the case. The newly developed DNA profile was then uploaded to the database. But unfortunately, no match was found. In 2002, detectives compared the DNA profile to that of Morse, who had remained on their radar for a long time. However, to their disappointment, they discovered that he was not the man they were looking for. Nothing of interest would surface for a long time. In September 2006, Candi's heartbroken mother quietly passed away in her home at the age of 82. She died not knowing who had killed her precious daughter. Around 2017, forensic genetic genealogy came to the limelight as a new scientific method being used to solve several cold cases. The method uses DNA analysis and traditional genealogical methods to solve crimes and identify missing persons. In other words, it combines science with family history research to piece together clues and bring justice to victims and their loved ones. With the method gaining popularity, detectives decided to give it a try and use it in helping them solve Candi's murder. Brittany Wright, a forensic scientist with the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory Division, got assigned to the case around the time. She was able to get her hands on a DNA sample that had been stored in the crime lab freezer since 2001. The next thing she did was reanalyze the sample. to confirm that it matched the original perpetrator's DNA profile from 2001. Upon confirming this, she followed up with a diagnostic analysis to determine if it could be used for forensic genetic genealogy. The sample was then sent to a private forensic lab. However, this turned out to be a futile effort as, according to the lab, the DNA sample was too degraded to work with. Detectives' hopes were completely dashed when they were given the news, and they could hardly hide their disappointment. A year would go by after this before detectives caught a lucky break. They learned about a particular laboratory that could efficiently work with degraded DNA like the one in Candi's case. The laboratory was known as Othram, and it was located in Texas. Brittany reached out to them to inquire if Candi's case was eligible. Upon receiving a positive response, she then sent off a small amount of the remaining DNA sample for testing. 6 months later, the lab came back with a result. 3 brothers had been identified as the possible suspects. Their names were John, Andrew, and Terry Hoff. As it turned out, all 3 were long dead. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that one of the men, John, had a daughter named Kathy. They decided to contact her to let her know that they were investigating her dead father. By that point, I had already looked up. A little girl murdered in 1959. So I knew who it was, Kathy said. She provided detectives with a DNA sample which was then analyzed, and the result was astonishing. It revealed that it was 2.9 million times more likely that Kathy's DNA was related to the suspect DNA profile than the general population. With this, detectives became more certain that John was the killer they had spent decades looking for. They did a background check on him and discovered that in addition to growing up in Spokane, he lived about a mile from Candi's home at the time of her murder. He also had a troubled past. In 1956, at the age of 17, enlisted in the Army. However, in 1961, 2 years after Candi's death, he was arrested for assaulting a woman. According to reports, he had approached the woman and used force to remove her clothes while she struggled and screamed for help. He then used the clothes to tie her up before trying to strangle her. Luckily, the woman survived the ordeal. For the crime, John spent 6 months in prison. And when he got out, the Army labeled him a deserter and discharged him from service. After this, John led a pretty normal life. He worked as a door-to-door salesman and also in a lumber yard to make ends meet. However, at the young age of 31, he ended up taking his own life. Apart from this, detectives also uncovered a possible connection between John and Candi. Hoff's stepsister was a 10-year-old campfire girl at the time of Candi's murder and had taken on the role of Candi's big sister in the program. Detectives believed that this was how John might have known Candi. When detectives uncovered all this about John, they decided to take one final step to confirm that he was Candi's killer. With Kathy's permission as well as a search warrant, they traveled to the cemetery where John was buried and exhumed his corpse. A DNA sample was taken from his remains and was then sent to the lab for testing. The result was what detectives expected. John was Candi's killer. "We got extremely lucky in that we got DNA from 1959, said former Spokane police detectives Brian Hammond, who worked tirelessly on the case till he retired in 2021. They had no concept of that at the time, and that's obviously what cracks the case. Otherwise, I don't believe it would have ever been solved." Hammond added, some of Candi's surviving relatives were contacted and informed about the breakthrough in the case. It's not closure, but at least there's some form of satisfaction knowing that the person that did it is at least named. "He may be in a grave, but he's named," said 77 Joan Posse, a cousin of Candi. Candi's relatives, however, remained saddened by the fact that her grandparents and parents never got to know who killed her. They never saw him pay or die for it or whatever. They went to their grave not knowing, and that was hard, Joan said. As for Kathy, the revelation that her father was the murderer shook her to the bones. "It's just really sad to find out that someone, not even just your dad, but someone in your family, could do something like that," Kathy said. "John passed away when she was only 9, and she grew up believing that he had done it out of depression. And now I think, no, he was evil," she said. "It wasn't an escape and away from it, but he got to die with people thinking he was an upstanding man and he wasn't." Kathy also rendered a public apology for her father's crime and the pain it caused the murdered girl's family. "I'm very, very sorry for what my dad did, that he took her life horribly," she said. "I hope that it gives peace knowing that even though it's not really justice because he doesn't get any punishment, his name has this on it now, and they can know it's solved." Through the act of one man, a family was plunged into misery and remained in the dark for more than 60 years. However, the determination and perseverance of several generations of detectives helped to reveal his identity and bring the bereaved family much-needed closure. The case of Jessica Bardwell. A team of detectives and FBI agents visited a remote ranch in Farmersville, North Texas, in the evening, and they immediately began searching the wooded area. They soon found a piece of metal covering something, and nearby there was an overwhelming smell of decay. Although the smell was unbearable, the officers were prepared for what they might find. When they removed the metal, they found a female body wrapped in a blue sheet, covered with a blanket and 2 red and gold towels stained with blood. A pile of trash mixed with dirt served as a makeshift grave for the victim. It was clear that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as their attempts to hide the body only made it more noticeable. The condition of the body was terrible, having decomposed significantly under the scorching sun for a week. It took experts 7 days to officially identify the victim, and they did so by requesting dental records of the presumed victim. The investigation suggested that the discovered body belonged to 27-year-old Jessica Bardwell. The examination revealed that her death was the result of a crime, but the exact cause could not be determined due to the body's advanced decomposition. Notably, an anonymous informant provided crucial information that led to the discovery of the body, but their identity was not disclosed. Jessica Bardwell, a beloved daughter and friend, had seemingly vanished from the home she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Lowe. Her father, Gary, sensed trouble and set out from Mississippi to Texas to search for her, following his instincts that she was in danger. Let's start from the beginning. Gary had an exceptionally strong bond with his daughter Jessica. He recalled being deeply moved when she was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Gary and Carla Bardwell were wonderful parents to Jessica and her older brother Brandon. The siblings got along well, with Brandon always protecting his little sister from bullies. Their grandmother Kitty, who adored her grandchildren, would often visit and engage in fun activities with them, such as reading books, sharing life stories, and playing games. In short, they were a quintessential American family. Jessica was a happy and kind girl with a unique style. She dreamed of working in the beauty industry and opening her own salon. When she was 14, her parents got divorced and she chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. Gary, a firefighter, remarried Gina, who was an excellent homemaker and took good care of Jessica. As Jessica grew up, she wanted to be independent and moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, where she worked as a waitress at Cobalt Restaurant. She kept in touch with her father, who would visit her and take her boating and fishing. Jessica's friend and restaurant manager, Kimberly, admired the strong bond between Jessica and her father. At Cobalt, Jessica met Terry and they started dating. However, she soon fell for Jason, a friend of Terry's, and left him for Jason. This new relationship turned her life around, and Jason promised to help her achieve her dreams. He got a job in Dallas, Texas, and Jessica followed him without telling her father, afraid of disappointing him. In Dallas, Jessica searched for a new job and looked for a location for her salon. She and Jason planned to get married and buy a house. However, her relationship with her father suffered, and she stopped answering his calls. Gary was worried and eventually found out about Jason and Jessica's move. He tried to reestablish contact, but discovered that Jason controlled all communications. Months later, Jessica contacted her father, and he met Jason when they visited Pascagoula. Gary disliked Jason and tried to convince Jessica not to return to Texas, but she insisted on following her dreams. Despite Gary's concerns, Jessica seemed happy and didn't show any signs of distress. Gary's fatherly instincts kicked in after meeting his daughter's boyfriend, Jason, prompting him to write a song titled "Taken for his daughter." Unfortunately, his concerns proved justified. For months after Jessica moved to Texas, she suddenly stopped responding to her family's calls. The final straw came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a gesture uncharacteristic of her. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong, especially since she missed a cherished family holiday. He immediately called Jason, who claimed he didn't know Jessica's whereabouts, citing their open relationship as the reason. However, Gary knew this was a lie, as Jason controlled every aspect of Jessica's life. The next morning, Gary drove to Texas, suspecting Jason's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. He messaged Jason, warning him that he would face consequences if Jessica wasn't home when he arrived. Upon reaching their apartment, Gary found no trace of Jessica or her belongings, but Jason continued to feign ignorance. Later, Kimberly shared disturbing details about Jessica's relationship with Jason. He had wasted money on drugs and entertainment, and his promises to help Jessica achieve her dreams had vanished. In private, Jason was rude and aggressive, leading to frequent conflicts with Jessica. With Jessica still missing, Gary filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. Detective Huron Hall, a father of 3 daughters, led the investigation into her disappearance. The police spoke with Jason several times, inspecting the house, but found no trace of Jessica. Jason claimed he last saw Jessica on May 8th, leaving without explanation, possibly to visit her parents. However, investigators discovered that Jessica had actually sold her car 3 weeks earlier, a fact Jason knew about since he was present at the sale. This raised suspicions, prompting the police to interrogate him again on May 12th. During the investigation, police found cocaine in Jason's kitchen and a suspicious substance in his garage. The Audi car inside the garage had mud stains and a detached bumper. Although the car was empty, the police suspected Jessica might be inside. The smell of decomposition led them to examine the trunk, where they found blood stains. Jason claimed he got stuck in the mud while searching for Jessica, but he couldn't explain the blood in the car or the cocaine in his home. Given the circumstances, the case was reclassified as a homicide to prevent Jason from fleeing. Despite the lack of a body, police charged Jason with homicide and the search for Jessica continued. Eventually, her body was found and the autopsy report revealed that she had been brutally discarded. A year later, Jason claimed the incident was an accident and hoped for the jury's understanding. However, the prosecution faced challenges in building their case and the defense staged a mock trial that resulted in a not guilty verdict. After Jason revealed the location of Jessica's body, he received a shorter prison sentence, allowing her family to give her a dignified burial. Jessica's father, Gary, was consumed by grief and anger, seeking justice in a unique way. He took a photo of Jason, placed it on a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer, finding some small comfort in this form of emotional release. Gary struggled to cope with his loss, feeling guilty for not persuading Jessica to stay away from her controlling boyfriend, Jason. He had hoped she would break up with him, but she had chosen to give him another chance instead. During the trial, Gary replayed their last conversations in his mind, including a call from Jessica when she admitted he was right about Jason after an argument. Although she had briefly found shelter with a friend, she had returned to Jason the next day. Gary had reluctantly accepted her decision, a choice he would later regret deeply. When Mr. Bardwell arrived in Texas, he was determined to seek justice. During her opening statement, prosecutor Cynthia Walker described Jason as a complex person who few people wanted to associate with due to his history of substance abuse, which often triggered violent outbursts. It's possible that Jessica was a victim of one such episode. Prosecutor Wes, when called upon Jason's former girlfriends to testify, they corroborated the prosecution's claims, sharing their own fears of Jason's aggression, which was fueled by jealousy. Like Jessica, Jason had isolated them from their loved ones and exhibited manipulative and deceitful behavior. These traits ultimately led each of them to end their relationships with him, which required careful planning and caution. However, Jason was able to present himself as a superior individual to many people, deceiving them about his true nature. In response to the allegations, Jason revealed that he had started using drugs at the age of 13, influenced by his friends, which led to addiction. Despite his struggles, he managed to earn multiple degrees and secure a job with a well-known global company, demonstrating his determination to not let his addiction define him. Jason admitted to planning to fulfill Jessica's dream of building a family together, motivated by his love for her. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason, contradicting his claims. The investigation revealed that Jessica died between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day she argued with her neighbors, the Jordans, and was last seen alive. After the argument, Jason moved Jessica's body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it stayed for several days. Forensic evidence confirmed that the blood found in the Audi belonged to Jessica. Jason then transported her body to a remote farm and hid it in the nearby woods. The sheet used to wrap the body was later found to be part of Jessica's bedding set, which Jason still had in his home, despite Jessica's death and her body decomposing in the car. After Jessica's death, the accused continued to see multiple women, and his phone contained evidence of this, including flirtatious messages and intimate photos that he had sent to them before meeting them at his apartment. Jason claimed that he was trying to distract himself from his emotional pain and guilty feelings by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. The investigation discovered Jason's presence at Jessica's time of death through a clever tactic. Because Jason had consistently denied any involvement, detectives asked Tommy Jordan, someone who knew Jason, to have a conversation with him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason finally admitted to making a terrible mistake with Jessica, expressing guilt and remorse, although he only acknowledged culpability for criminal negligence. Jason's statement to the police was seen as a confession, and they realized they had caught him. Jason made a deal with the prosecution and revealed the location of Jessica's body. At the trial, he finally told his side of the story. According to Jason, he and Jessica had taken libido-enhancing pills that evening and got intimate in the shower. During the shower, Jason slipped and Jessica fell, hitting her head on the bathtub. She complained of feeling hot and dizzy and sat down. Jason claimed he offered to call an ambulance, but Jessica refused, saying she just needed to rest and sleep. However, the next morning, Jason found her lying on his chest, unconscious and not breathing. Despite his attempts to revive her, Jessica was dead. Scared of being accused of murder, Jason hesitated to call the police and decided to take matters into his own hands. He initially left the body in his car and later hid it on a remote farm, carelessly dumping her in a pile of trash without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was not believable due to his questionable character and the medical examination findings. The autopsy revealed that Jessica had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have resulted from just falling in the shower, indicating that Jason had attempted to cover up evidence of physical abuse. As a result, his entire story was proven to be a fabrication. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason Lowe to 50 years in prison, a reduced term due to a plea deal with the prosecution. Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. At the sentencing, Gary, Jessica's father, felt relieved that justice had been served, but was disturbed by Jason's lack of remorse. 2 of Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the sentencing. Chambers expressed sympathy for Jessica, warning her to get out of the relationship if she could. Even now, Jason maintains his innocence, claiming the homicide was an accident. Unfortunately, Jessica didn't recognize Jason's true nature until it was too late. She had grown up with a positive male role model in her father, Gary, and didn't realize that some men can be deceitful and violent. This tragic story serves as a warning to women to prioritize their own safety, freedom, and well-being, lest they suffer a devastating fate, not just for themselves, but for their loved ones. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.